All right. Welcome back to Mixtapes to Myself. For everybody who has been tuning in, thank you so much. We appreciate it. By we, I mean me and the basket case cats. Normally they're asleep when I do my recordings. Today they are not. So it's going to get weird, but that should be fun. Um, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. Please share, like, subscribe, and now back to it. Chapter 7 The Beach. When Sam and her dad got home, she said hi to her mom and her sister and then ran upstairs to her room. She sat down in her bed and hugged her stuffed puppy. She collapsed backwards, and the thoughts started to race through her head like a greyhound with the zoomies. She had a boyfriend, which was really cool, but she had somehow allowed it to become an all consuming part of her life. She was having trouble imagining a universe where her and Nick weren't really speaking. She wondered where Phoebe was and if she had stopped talking to her too. She looked at the alarm clock next to her bed and saw that it was already 3 o'clock and realized that she needed to start getting ready. She hugged her puppy a little tighter and then got up to rifle through her closet. She threw on a bikini she found in her closet and then decided on a tight pair of dark flared jeans and a form-fitting burgundy top. She found a leather jacket in her closet, which she recognized as her cousin's. She had always envied her cousin's sense of style. She happily pulled it out of the closet and carefully laid it on her bed. She sat down in front of her mirror and started to rummage through her drawers. In the right hand drawer was a small tray of makeup. Her mom had done a Mary Kay party last year, so she had learned some of the basics, but she figured bare minimum was best in this situation because she wasn't sure what her usual style was. She grabbed a tube of mascara and pulled the wand out, looking at the brush with a mixture of excitement and terror. Here goes nothing, she said, as she remembered the instructions the Mary Kay lady had given her. She looked down and swiped the brush upwards on her lashes, then looked up and swiped the brush downward on her lower ones. The brush got a little too close and she found herself flinching instinctively. She looked into the mirror and couldn't help but crack up laughing because the black mascara had been blinked all over her eyelids and the area underneath. Well, that went well, she said as she grabbed a tissue and started to wipe the smears off her face. When she finally managed to clean herself up, she figured it was good enough. She swiped on some blush and then decided to do the same to her eyelids since the makeup had officially spooked her. She looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't help but think that she looked pretty. She had never considered herself to be beautiful, despite what her dad had always told her. But today she felt like she really liked her face. She looked back at the alarm clock and it read 3:50 in big red numbers, so she smiled at her reflection, put on her jacket, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door to head downstairs. She reached the front door and her mom asked where she was going from the couch a few feet away. Ben's picking me up. He didn't tell me where we're going, though, she said. Her mom didn't say anything, but Sam could sense the shift in her mood at the mention of Ben. Did anyone like this guy? She thought her mom was going to fight her, to tell her she couldn't go, but to her surprise, she just said curtly without even looking at her, "Home by 11," and continued watching the cooking show on TV. Sam saw the tension in her mom's jaw and felt a deep, uneasy guilt. But she needed to see this through and figure out why she had been sent here. "I'm going to wait on the porch. I'll be home on time, I promise," she said as she unlocked and opened the front door. "Love you," she said as she walked out of the house, feeling the weight of the guilt in her chest. She heard her mom's "love you too" as she walked onto the enclosed porch and the hurried "make good choices" as she closed the door. The lilac bush was in full bloom and the windows were all open, so it was all she could smell. She inhaled, grateful for the memories that scent always seemed to bring forward. She stood there wondering what tonight was going to bring when a white car pulled up next to her house. She paused for a second, unsure if this was Ben or not, when the horn honked and she jumped at the sound. The passenger window rolled down and she heard her name shouted from the driver's seat. Well, if she was hoping for romance, she felt sorely mistaken, and the disappointment was palpable. She sighed, walked towards the car, and hopped in. Hey, she said, almost too quietly, and she reminded herself that she was supposed to pretend like she belonged here. She placed her purse on her lap and buckled her seatbelt as Ben pulled the car back onto the road. Hey, yourself, he said. He was smiling. It was the kind of big, goofy grin that was Sam's favorite. She found her stomach doing somersaults, even though she had pretty much just met this boy. She could tell he was tall, even though he was sitting. Curly brown hair that was cropped at the sides, that sat like a mop on the top of his head. He was pale with really beautiful green eyes, and Sam was back to admiring his smile, which was a little crooked, but in the best way. How was your day? She asked him, still staring at him, maybe a little too much. She was trying to figure him out in a very short period of time. It was okay. Work was all right, but I'm excited to go up to Drew's beach house and relax for the night. They're doing a fire. It's going to be great, he said. And he rested his hand, palm up, on the center armrest between their seats. Sam looked at his hand, and he waggled his fingers as if to invite her hand to join his. Sam found herself quoting her dad internally. Well, when in Rome. She reached her hand out to his. Their fingers intertwined, and his hand gripped hers firmly. She felt his thumb running up and down her palm. She felt like there weren't just fireworks, but a unicorn and a dragon flying around in the middle of the fireworks. Maybe there was a leprechaun doing somersaults thrown in there for luck. She couldn't figure it out, but her heart was about to flutter right out of her chest and join a plethora of mythical creatures in this fictional fireworks show. Ben turned on the stereo and some music she hadn't heard before came on. She wanted to ask who the band was, but she was worried it would look far too suspicious. So she just sat there in silence, focused on the hand holding onto hers. They sat quietly, listening to the music for over an hour, winding through small towns with quaint little squares and quiet roads with horse farms on either side, until they pulled to the end of the street and Sam gasped. The street ended in a 2-lane road with a guardrail that dropped off, and all you could see was the waves of the ocean in the distance. It was the most beautiful view, and with the sun shining down in the early evening, it was absolutely breathtaking. All right, an author's note, and this is one that I really, really love. The coastal road, the part where, because Sam's coming up and all she can see is the ocean, that is a real thing. When I used to go to the beach with my high school boyfriend, we wouldn't take 495 to 95. For anybody who's from New England, the Mass, New Hampshire area, you know what I'm talking about. So we would take the state routes. So we would go, I believe it was 133 to 111 to 1 to 1A. So it was all like back roads, really, really scenic, really pretty. And I used to love going there. And then you'd get to 1A and you'd hit this point, and that's exactly what you'd see. You'd see the guardrail and then just ocean. But it's a great place, and I highly suggest it. Again, shout out to Ray's, shout out to 1A, shout out to Rye, New Hampshire, because it's a cool little place. All right, Back to the chapter. Ben laughed and said, "You always loved this view." She looked at him and their eyes locked as he leaned over. They were at a stop sign, so she knew that this was it. And she leaned over too. Their lips met, and the unicorn, dragon, and leprechauns in the sky exploded and replicated until there was an absolute chaos of light, sound, and warmth dancing around in her head. She couldn't understand how four lips meeting together could cause such a reaction in every inch of her body. When they separated, he pulled onto the road and she melted back into the passenger seat with a dreamy smile on her face, looking out her window and watching the ocean waves crashing onto the rocky shoreline. It had been her first kiss. She had always imagined what it would be like, and this was so much more. It had been like strapping herself onto a rocket and then tap dancing all the way to the moon. It was like waking up in the middle of winter and seeing the heavy layer of snow on your window and just knowing you didn't have school and your whole soul is bouncing around in your body with joy. It was the first hill on a roller coaster when there's that tiny bit of fear, but then a weightlessness that makes you feel like you're flying. Gravity be damned. It was floating in the water for hours, watching the clouds waft by with your ears below the surface so everything is dulled, and all you can hear is the thoughts in your own head. It was absolute magic. They ended up on a small side road with a dune at the end of the street. When they reached the last house on the right, Ben pulled over to the side of the road, readjusted the car a bit, and then threw the shifter into park. It was a small bungalow with wooden siding that had been blue at one point, but had been weathered down to a bluish gray. A large boy with his hair cropped short, wearing an overly large Bruins jersey and jean shorts, appeared in the doorway. He walked out and shouted, "Ben, Sam, welcome to my humble abode," as he swept his arms out, presenting the space to them as if it were a grand palace. He guffawed at the grandiose gesture and grabbed Ben's shoulder, leading him towards the house. It was a comical sight because he was only an inch or two taller than Sam, which forced Ben to stoop while being led. Sam followed them into the house, and it looked exactly like you would expect a house at the beach in New England to look like. It was dipped in whites and blues and pale beigey colors, with smatterings of seashell decor scattered throughout. A few very fluffy blankets were strewn about on couches and chairs as if someone had rummaged through the closets and dumped out their entire content. "Jimmy's already outside getting the fire pit set up." He paused as if done, but then added, "You can take the boy out of Boy Scouts, but apparently you can't take the Boy Scout out the boy." He guffawed again, a full body laugh that Sam couldn't help but laugh along with. Sam could hear music wafting in through the gauzy curtains of the open windows. Ben kept following his friend, and Sam, not knowing what to do, kept following them both. They walked through two curtains and onto a wooden deck and made their way up an inclined walkway over a short dune and found themselves on the beach. In the distance, they saw a boy stacking wood in various piles. As they got closer, Sam could make out a mop of long, curly brown hair, and a pair of black sunglasses pushed his hair out of his face like a headband. He was pulling thin pieces of wood and dried grass and bunching them in the center of a circle of rocks. He saw them approaching, and a big, goofy smile spread across his face as he hollered, "I'll be finished stacking in about 5 minutes, Drew." The boy standing with Ben gave them a thumbs up and then started herding them back into the house. "We've got to grab a few things in here, and then we'll head out to join him," he told them. He handed Sam a blanket for herself and asked her to carry some supplies for s'mores. She threw the marshmallows and chocolate bars in her purse and carried the box of graham crackers in her hand with the blanket. There are beach chairs by the back door where we just came in, so grab one if you want, he told her as he herded Ben back into the kitchen. Sam stood there, wondering if she should wait for them or head outside by herself. She was staring at the box of graham crackers, confused how Ben could just leave her there by herself in a strange house like that, but remembered that maybe this wasn't a strange house, and she just didn't know it because she just got here this morning. She shrugged and decided to just walk out and meet Jimmy, who, based on his smile and general demeanor, seemed to be pretty friendly. She grabbed a folding beach chair and hooked it so the metal frame hung in the crook of her elbow, and it started trudging along in the sand towards the fire pit. When she got there, she understood why Drew had handed her the blanket, because the wind picked up once you were further away from the house, and it was genuinely cold out here. She reached the fire pit and waved awkwardly to Jimmy, who didn't have a free hand as he was stacking wood, so instead kind of flapped his elbow as a way of saying hello. As he did, Sam laughed, and he seemed to realize he must look like some sort of overgrown bird creature and laughed with her. Hey, Sam, how have you been? He asked her, once he had the wood stacked in a way he approved of. Pretty good, Jimmy. How are you? She asked right back, relieved that Drew had dropped his name before stealing her boyfriend. She pulled the seat and the back of the chair apart, and the chair popped into its proper sitting form. She propped the metal bars into the sand and wrapped the blanket cozily around herself. Before she sat down, she remembered the s'mores ingredients and pulled the chocolate and marshmallows out of her purse, handing them and the graham crackers to Jimmy, who placed them carefully on top of the cooler that was already sitting there. She sat down and breathed in the smell of the ocean, sighing gently as she exhaled, curling herself further into the blanket wrapped around her like a grand shawl. So what are you doing? She asked Jimmy, watching him stack some larger pieces of wood against each other in a little pyramid, surrounding the little bird's nest in the center. Well, you stack the bigger pieces of wood around the kindling, he said. He said the last word while pointing to the part Sam had been calling a bird's nest. She nodded, and he continued. The kindling lights easy and fast, but it needs to catch enough of the larger pieces of wood in order to get a really decent fire going. He straightened up, put his hands on his hips as if he was trying to sense the future of his wood stack. He lifted his chin and sniffed the air, and then squatted back down to the fire stack, adjusting a few pieces while explaining. The wind is really strong today, so I have to adjust the wood to protect the kindling from the wind, but it'll actually be a benefit when I get this fire going because it'll help feed it. Sam continued nodding and just said, neat, quietly. Sam saw Drew first, walking with a tall, thin, blonde girl. As they moved towards the fire pit, she saw Ben following behind them with another tall, lithe girl with a head of perfect strawberry blonde curls and a sweet, round face. Ben was clearly telling a story, and she heard the girls laugh, which sounded like the gentle tinkling of Christmas bells. They barely seemed to notice anyone else in the circle until they had to decide where to place their chairs. At this point, Sam had space on either side of her, with Drew a few feet away to her right and Jimmy several feet to her left. Without even looking at her, Ben placed his chair in the sand on the other side of Drew and sat down, the strawberry girl sitting down on his right side. Sam's cheeks were pink, her emotions somewhere between confusion, frustration, jealousy, and humiliation. Ben was finishing the story to the strawberry, making motions with his hands to illustrate whatever hilarious thing he was saying. The strawberry was bent over, giggling in her gentle, sweet kind of way. Sam crossed her arms under her blanket and then remembered what Nick had told her. She also thought about the kiss. That made her feel like a bunch of elves were baking fresh cookies while doing backflips in her stomach. She was so confused how someone who made her feel so special and someone who clearly liked a lot could sit here and make her feel so invisible and insignificant. She had stopped talking to her best friend for a guy who was willing to sit with some other girl at a bonfire. She felt alone, but most importantly, this was making her feel infinitely stupid. She had watched enough teen movies before to know that if your boyfriend is sitting next to a pretty girl and making her laugh like that, something isn't right. Ben looked over and walked around the fire, crouching beside her chair and asking nonchalantly, "You okay?" She was flabbergasted by the audacity of the question. What did he mean? Is she okay? Sam had a problem controlling her face and knew that he was aware that she was not. She had hoped for the most romantic night of her life, and now she was sitting with the strawberry, completely ignoring her entire existence. How the hell would he feel? She took a deep breath and said, "Sure," very curtly, and Ben raised an eyebrow at her tone. She was also incapable of containing her angry sarcasm. "I'm fine," she said, again, a little too bluntly to assuage his obvious concern. He sighed and said, "I'm sorry, Sam. We just had to iron out some plans," he explained. Her eyes narrowed, her mouth opened, as if she was trying to catch fireflies in it. "What do you mean? What plans do you have exactly?" Sam asked him, the rising fury clearly written all over her face and her words dripping with derision. Ben rolled his eyes and said quietly, "Sam, we're not going through all of this again. We were broken up, and Tiffany asked me to go to prom with her. I can't just drop her because we got back together." You would have thought he actually physically slapped her across the face. She scoffed, her jaw hitting the sand and becoming a house for the crabs. "We're not going to prom together?" Her skull nodding like a bobblehead as she said it. She had lost all semblance of understanding. Ben rolled his eyes again and stood up, quietly saying to her, "We'll talk about this later," while he walked back to the strawberry. Sam's mind felt like the Kentucky Derby, but the horses and the jockeys were on fire, the stands were lava, and Hephaestus himself was announcing the race. She watched as Ben sat back down next to the strawberry, and everyone was now seated around the fire, laughing and having a grand old time. How could anyone have such a great time when the Earth's crust had just opened up and was threatening to swallow her whole? Sam would have expected herself to cry or to be sad, but all she felt was a seething, boiling, apoplectic rage that seemed to be unending in its fiery mass of anger. She closed her eyes and listened to the fire crackle, focused on the sound of the waves in the distance, and breathed in deeply, holding it in her lungs and then exhaling slowly through her nose. She did this a few times, and when she opened her eyes, she could feel the fire inside of her slow down a little bit, but realized it burned a little brighter and harder when she saw Ben and the strawberry. All right, another author's note to interrupt. The prom story is 100% real. That did actually happen to me in real life. Uh, my high school boyfriend and I had broken up or taken a break or something, and some girl asked him to prom. And he took that girl to his prom. And I did not go to my prom. I have a picture somewhere because I went to the pre-prom, like they do like the actual promenade before the prom where they announce everybody. Everybody's in their beautiful dresses and suits. And so everybody kind of they announce them and then they get to walk through like half the town that shows up for this. And it's really, really cute. And I showed up in jeans and a tank top and my weird Puma jacket. Anyways, back to the story. She left her purse on the chair and started walking towards the ocean with the blanket wrapped around her. The group called after her, but she just ignored them and kept on walking. She wasn't really sure what her end game here was, but she knew that she was pissed. To borrow a word from her mother that she hadn't been allowed to say before. Until today, she said to herself and laughed wryly. She made the decision once the group around the fire was far enough that she couldn't hear them, and the glint of the fire became the size of a birthday candle. She took off her shoes, peeled off her jeans and shirt, and then draped the blanket back around her shoulders to shield her exposed body. She looked back and realized no one had followed her, which only steeled her resolve. She dropped the blanket and ran towards the waves. As soon as the frigid water hit her toes, she regretted it, but she was already there and had already stripped herself down, so she may as well go through with it. She got up to her thighs, still sort of bounce running, and dove into the water. Oh, the water was absolutely freezing. But after the initial shock wore off, her body started to adjust. She treaded water for a little while and then swam along the shoreline. She knew better than to swim out, so she stayed closer to the shore. She'd always felt at home in the water, and she just needed to get away from everyone at that moment. She wanted to go home and forget all this nonsense ever happened. Eventually, she swam overhand back to the shore, wrapped the blanket around her. She sat down shivering in the sand, thinking about everything that had happened today. It had been the weirdest Sunday she had possibly ever experienced. She also noticed that no one had come to find her. She flashed back to yesterday at camp and how alone she thought she felt. At least yesterday, she had her two best friends and her dad with her. Now she was sitting on the beach, shivering alone, while her boyfriend chatted up the strawberry and made their plans for the goddamned prom. She rolled her eyes and sighed while she hugged her knees and the blanket a little tighter into her body. Once she had dried off a little more, she threw her jeans back on and pulled the top over her head. She looked in her purse and found a small mirror and discovered that she looked more like the Crow than a teenage girl thanks to her running mascara. She ran her fingers underneath her eyes until the black splotches were nothing but a memory. She wrung out her hair one last time and then tousled it a little, hoping she looked more beachy cool than homeless vagabond. She walked back to the fire and sat down. Ben barely even looked up, and everyone had been so engrossed in whatever conversation that no one had even noticed that she had returned. She was, for all intents and purposes, truly and entirely invisible. A few hours later, they had driven home in silence, as she was clearly still apoplectic about the prom, and Ben was pissed that she had jumped into the ocean like a drama queen. All right, a final author's note. I know that the coastal road was real, the prom story was real. Everything else in this story, in this chapter, is absolutely 100% made up. Like all of it. It's nonsense. None of this ever happened. I feel bad for the strawberry just a little bit because it wasn't her fault. She didn't know any better. She seemed, I'm sure she was a nice girl. But if given the opportunity, I think Sam probably would have thrown fists. She would have thrown down with this girl. Um, she was in a mood. The last parts of this that are true is A, I also cannot control my face. Back when I was a teenager, I was absolutely filled with vitriol, and I was a scary, scary teenage girl. I have said for years, if I had to teach teenage me, I would quit on the spot. Be like, nope, nope, we're done here. Safi Baraka, I'm out. I can't. Whew! Teenage Allie was terrifying. Terrifying. So I definitely couldn't control my face. I definitely did not control my attitude or my words. And I was 1000% the biggest drama queen known to mankind. I absolutely would have jumped in the ocean and then sat there like, why isn't anybody coming to see me? 100% beautiful. But, anyways, back to the story. Silence, as she was clearly still apoplectic about the prom, and Ben was pissed that she had jumped into the ocean like a drama queen. She got out of his car and slammed the door when she had gotten home and stormed into her house. Her parents said hello and she grunted angrily in response before stomping up the stairs to her bedroom. She didn't have the energy to shower or do anything else. Oh, she was done with today. It had been enough. She wanted nothing else to do with 17. She threw on her pajamas and climbed into bed, clutching her stuffed dog with all her might. She thought about her day and everything she had learned. This was not where she thought her life would or should be. She couldn't believe that she had chosen that boy and the strawberry over her friends. She had never felt more alone than she did at this exact moment in time. She squeezed her puppy a little tighter as she thought how badly she just wanted to go home. She was so tired of this exploratory mission or whatever this was. As she drifted closer to sleep, she kept desperately repeating the mantra, "There's no place like home." She thought to herself as sleep slowly engulfed her. Dorothy made it back. Maybe I will too. Chapter 8. Home again, jiggity jig. Sam blinked in the dawning light of a new morning. She was still holding her puppy, but something felt different about him. Her eyes popped open as she felt the sleeping bag around her. She slowly sat up in bed and looked around, suddenly wide awake, and realized she was back in the cabin at camp. She held in the yelp of relief that yearned to be released from her lungs and silently punched the air above her head in triumph. She was back at camp. "I'm home," she whispered to herself before adding with a giggle, "Kind of." She laid back down and hugged her stuffed dog, who felt firmer than he had in that other place. Had it all been a dream, or had she really lived a day in her own future? She pinched herself and knew that she was in fact real. Sam's mind was racing through all the things from yesterday, trying to decipher all of the details and figure out what had happened. She had lived through so much in such a short period of time. Things that she would have never experienced had been her reality for the day. If it had been real, she had kissed a boy, and it was everything she could have dreamt for and more. But then again, the boy turned out to be kind of a giant butthead, and she couldn't quite fathom what her older self was thinking. She was trying to give herself the benefit of the doubt because she had no idea what that Sam had been through between now and who she would be then. She couldn't possibly imagine what had happened that would make her give up her friendship with Nick, or even possibly put up walls between them. She suddenly realized just how tired she was, and she rolled over onto her side, shoving her hand under her pillow. But there was a crinkle beneath her fingertips, and she pulled a folded piece of paper from beneath her pillow. It was a letter, and it read, "Dearest Sammy," in handwriting she recognized as her own. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. As always, please share, like, and subscribe. I know I'm beating a dead horse, but if I don't say it, I'm not doing what is now kind of my job. Next week, so next Saturday, chapter 9 is coming out. This is where stuff starts to get really weird. We're going to fast forward to 2004. The title of the chapter is It's Fine. It is not, in fact, fine. It's going to be a really interesting journey. So I hope you continue reading and tuning in. Again, chapters drop on Thursdays on Wattpad. All of the links are in my bio. And the next video is coming out on Saturdays. Right now, I already have the entire next section up until chapter 13 ready to go. So we are caught up. And so, again, every Thursday, I'm going to be releasing a new chapter. Every Saturday, I'll be releasing a new video. So please stay tuned. Again, please like, subscribe, and share. I'm looking at all the boys who are surrounding me because all my boys are asleep around me, and Blue's asleep in the other room. But we would super appreciate it. Again, please share, like, and subscribe. This project will not get off the ground without your help, okay? So please share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with somebody who you love, who you think will enjoy a very strange but very heartfelt story. And thank you all so much for being here. And I will see you next week. All right. Have a great week. As I always say, I love y'all. Please keep spreading sunshine, keep spreading kindness, keep spreading good things. All right. I'll see y'all next week. Bye.